What's going on? I'm Carrie Fearman with Talk Sports, and today on the show, I'm talking to my new best friend. Well, after sitting down with her and getting to know this all-around incredible woman, I'd really like to be her new best friend. Today, I sit down with a woman who is not only a trailblazer in women's sports, being a wrestler for over 20 years now, but she's also an established country music artist, and a wife, and a mother. Multi-talented, strong, driven, inspirational, badass WWE star Mickie James is who I'm talking about.
From Richmond, Virginia, Mickie James.
There are a few sports that have really carved the way for the rise of women's athletics. And I personally consider tennis and wrestling the two most predominant sports in this category. Mickie James is one of those women that has really carved the way for future generations of women to rise in the sports arena. Women are on the up and up now more than ever. And we can all thank women like Mickie for her hard work, drive, perseverance, and fight. How did you get into wrestling?
My dad actually was the wrestling fan. It was kind of like our bond. We would watch wrestling on the weekends or whatever. And just remember sitting and watching wrestling with him. And then when I got out of high school, I didn't really have like a lot of direction as far as what I wanted to do. I was working at a bar. A friend of mine who was like one of the big bouncers at the bar, he suggested that I went and checked out school, which I didn't even realize that such a thing existed.
Right.
Like I just thought they found these people like the circus. And so I went up and I checked it out and fell in love, and I've been doing it ever since. And this actually, this marks like 20 years since I first stepped foot in that school, which is crazy to me to feel like how far it's come, but also how far the business has come.
From when you first got involved in wrestling, how has it developed? How has it evolved? Obviously, I think it's become a lot more mainstream with the show, the WWE has.
For sure.
How has that changed the world of wrestling, and how has it just kind of evolved in general, in particular for women?
I always wanted to be taken seriously as a female wrestler, and I always wanted to help change the landscape of the business for women, and to be not just, good for a girl, which was a term often used, but like to be as good, if not better, than the guys. When I first broke in, I only really trained with guys because there weren't very many females in the industry. There weren't very many females that were like coming up and trying to break in. And most of them that were breaking in were all found in other avenues, because it wasn't really the wrestling for the most part. There was a few women that were obviously the Alundra Blazes and the Sherry Martells that were wrestlers. But then there were also women who were mostly eye candy and just, pretty girls, and they were out there, but they really didn't wrestle, or, they did kind of like gaga matches in a sense. We'll call it that. So when I first came in, it was like just there wasn't a lot of female talent out there. I mean, it was few and far between, and so even most of my matches on the independent levels, and we're talking in front of anywhere from 100 people at an armory to I think my biggest show on the independents was for Maryland Championship Wrestling, which is where I transferred schools to.
Okay.
And that was in front of like 1,800 people. So then to go from that to when I finally got hired, and then to headline WrestleMania with 80,000 people. It was a big deal.
Oh yeah,
it's huge. It's crazy. It's just crazy how much the business, even since when I first debuted in WWE to now,
right, where
women's wrestling and just women's empowerment has become on the forefront, especially in the last couple of years.
What I really like about wrestling, and that I relate to with tennis, honestly, is I think that wrestling and tennis are two of the best, most empowering sports right now for women. They're two of the most publicized and advertised sports as far as the women's sector goes.
Right.
We have the WNBA, and we have the women's soccer leagues, which is amazing, but can be very hard to find.
Right.
Whereas wrestling for women, tennis for women, is much more on an equality level, I would say, than maybe any other sports.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that you're right. I think it's great how instead of it being these gaga matches, I love that description, I think it's awesome that you guys are out there. I've watched some of these and I'm literally like,
is she okay? Like,
Yeah.
holy
No, I'm
cow.
not okay. I'm
I
not.
mean, it's impressive.
And it's always been known as a very male-dominated sport, and that men were always the the main event. They were all the headline attractions. It was like you'd never see, up until recently I should say, you would never have seen a women's match as the headline match,
Right.
as that was on the marquee of what was selling. That's huge steps, I think, and it's long overdue. I think that women have been working so hard for a very long time.
You have to feel good, though, because you're also a trailblazer for this next generation.
For
which
sure.
is a cool role to be in. You
Sure,
know, you're
yeah.
watching this like awesome evolution for women, and you've been in it since it was nowhere near where it is today.
Right.
First of all, can you explain to me the difference between, because there's so many divisions, I feel like, right? So there's
there's
a
the
women's
Total
division,
Divas,
but
you're
then there's
talking-
a divas, right?
No. Before this evolution, we should
Okay.
say, which I feel like this evolution started long ago, but now because of the fans, it's honestly the fans that have brought this to the forefront the way it is. And the company and everyone has then answered back with, okay, you guys want women to be taken seriously? Okay, we'll take them seriously. So then they dropped the name Diva. They dropped the Divas Championship.
Got it. Okay.
Brought back the women's championships, but revamped them to make them new. And so it's not the old school women's championship that I was fighting for before the Divas Championship. So it's all like this transitional stuff, right? So I feel like they answered, with the Divas stuff, they answered that. They thought that's what the audience perhaps wanted, or because it's such a male-dominated audience.
Right.
But they were really trying to capture, I think, in the sense of the younger girls to kind of give them, an inspiration or something to, which obviously must have worked in some aspect, because now you think about, we now have brought back the women's championship, and there's all these women who were watching in the Divas era that are now, fighting for the championship. So it's kind of cool, but that's where Total Divas came from.
Got
So
it.
Total from the Divas Championship and everything, and it was the moniker, that was what the girls, the collection of ladies of the division were called the Divas.
Right.
Which I was always like on the fence about, because I go like, well, prior to that, every female had their own individual name, right? So then they could then become a household name. Whereas then if you were branched under this umbrella of the Divas, then you are a group of 15, 20 girls. So it's a little harder for you to be able to break outside that box to make your own statement, because you're now under the Diva umbrella.
I have to ask you at the show on E about the Divas division.
I've never been on the show.
Yeah, okay.
I think I did, actually, when I did like a red carpet, I think Lana was on the red carpet, and I may have cameoed or something in there. Just like joking with her, but yeah, I've never been on the show.
How do you feel about it? Do you feel like it's helped kind of get wrestling out there?
So there's people who don't particularly watch wrestling, but they love E, and they watch pretty much everything on E, and they love Total Divas, and so they know the girls through there. So that is they wouldn't even watch their wrestling matches or know that. And then there has been a huge audience that have crossed over that, because they're fans of them from that show, have then turned over and started watching them and are fans of them on the wrestling show.
Being a wrestler is a very desired thing for women now. What do you say to, some of these girls that are out there that want to become wrestlers?
It's a long road. Like for me, it was a very long, hard road, because I had to take the long way. I wanted to be a wrestler, so that's what I trained as. Like I didn't just go to acting school or modeling school or anything like that and have my casting director like put me in for a spot. I literally like went to wrestling school and would drive, for $25 and a handshake, where I go, like barely could put gas in my car to get back home. Like I took the hard route. So for me, I would say always, I tell everyone to get your degree and get your education no matter what. Like even when I finally got signed, I went back and got my college degree just in business. So just so I would have that, I would have something,
Smart. Yeah, that's very smart.
So that for one, but I'm also a very big advocate of like no one can ever tell you no except for yourself. So if you believe and that's what you want to do, then you have to go after it, and you have to just find a really good school, like do your research, find a really great school, and be willing to make all the sacrifices that are like that's what separates the men from the boys, right? Are the sacrifices, and like everybody wants something, but they aren't always willing to give what it takes to make it.
For the girl that her goal and her dreams and her heart and her ambition is set on becoming a professional wrestler, but and works hard at it and does everything that she can, but it just doesn't happen. Do you have any kind of, because I'm sure you've met a lot of those girls that have really tried,
Yeah.
you know, and perhaps were close, but, you know, just weren't quite right.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is probably true for you.
Yeah.
For you from the tennis world.
Yeah, it
also,
definitely
but
transfers over into life, this kind of
they
advice.
say- I don't know. It's hard to say something
Yeah.
to them because I have been in those moments where I almost quit and I was going to go home, and it was my friend Tommy Dreamer, who was my boss at the time when I was in developmental, and I was sitting there for a couple of years, and I was watching all these girls kind of like come up that had never really wrestled before. I mean, it was this beginning of the diva era, if you will. So then they were all like just models and stuff, and they were stunning, beautiful, and talented, but they had never wrestled a day before in their life, and they were all debuting on television, and I'm still sitting in developmental, and I'd been wrestling at that point 5-6 years, and I'm helping them learn how learn the moves.
Right,
Like they're
right.
sitting them down so they can help learn, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane to me. Like after everything, like I'm sacrificing, and all I want is to be the greatest women's champion of all time. I mean, why set your goals here? You got to set them there.
Totally.
And I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like, I don't know what to do. What I'm doing wrong. Like, maybe I just came in at the wrong time, or like whatever. And I almost quit. And Tommy Dreamer sent me home from developmental on a Christmas. It was supposed to be a long Christmas break, and just had me talk to he's like, just go home for a bit and breathe and take a moment before you make this. He's like, I've watched you work so hard and so long for this.
Yeah.
And don't give it up now just because you're disheartened by the landscape.
Yeah.
And he honestly changed, because I think that I would have walked away then, and I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. Because then I came back, and then I went on to do everything that I've done, which is amazing. But I think that we all have those moments, and it is a lot harder to make it in this business. For every one person that makes it, there's 1,000 people that won't.
Right.
Both on the men and the women's side. Like, you have to be very talented, I think, to be in the ring, because it is like acting, except for you only get one take, and it's athletic acting, and you only get one chance to get it right.
Yeah.
And or wrong, and just sometimes it really hurts.
Yeah. I think what you said. It translates to life really in general, right? You know what I mean? It's like you really want something. It's like, how do you learn to lose? Kind of like take the answer no.
There's always a reason for everything.
Yeah.
And whatever you believe in or whatever, there's always a reason as to why. You know what
Right.
I mean? But you have to. The only thing you can do is like utilize those life experiences and those tools and assets that you learned from that craft to parlay them into something that you are equally passionate about and that you love, and that you can you have to visualize it, right? Like, so if you can see yourself doing this into a platform, perhaps that was your original dream, but then in that aspect you had like this spark of imagination where you go like, oh, you know what would be really cool, whether it's with this character, or like, what if I did like this thing with the tools that I've learned here, and that would be the thing that actually takes you onto another level, and could then turn around and bring you back to what you thought your original dream was, and then that may not be as shiny as it was before you had this thing.
Right.
So you just never know how it's going to work out.
Was there a defining moment for you where you finally didn't have to look at those girls and be like, well, I'm training them, why are they? And you were finally like, hey, it's my turn.
The moment that I knew I was in the storyline with Trish, which was my beginning segment, my opening, my intro to the world of wrestling, WWE, and I kind of felt the energy as I was going, but when I finally did my turn, and it was like Saturday Night Main Event or whatever, when I finally did my turn, I could feel the energy from the fans.
Yeah.
Right? Like, to where it's like, oh, they were kind of behind the storyline. It was interesting. It was different. It was unique. But I could feel their energy where they like, oh, I kind of dig this. I dig this chick or whatever. I know she's different and she can actually wrestle, and it's cool. But then when I got to WrestleMania, that was my very first WrestleMania, and that's where I won the women's championship for the first time. That was, I feel like, when I remember like I did this move off the top where Trish was going for, she does this handstand, and where she like flips you off the top rope, and then I stopped her and I just did some move where I just stopped her with her leg over the top rope and then hopped all the way to the floor from the ring. And I remember I let out this, I did like this thing, and I let out this scream like, yeah, and I was just like, in that moment I could hear the people, like, which I sometimes, you get lost in the moment, so they say, oh, you want to listen to the people, right? And I was listening the whole time, but I was so lost in like this whole dance, if you will. But I just remember letting out this scream like, yeah. and I could just hear the people, and I still like get goosebumps when I think about it. Like
cool.
that was the moment where when I heard them erupt behind me, I was like, oh my God, this is it.
Yeah.
Like this is like one of the greatest moments in my life, besides my son being born. You
Yeah.
know, like, which that didn't happen until years later. So
Right.
at that moment, this was the culmination of all my dreams, all my hard work, everything, sleeping in my car, you know, eating tuna out of cans, like all of it. Just, and then I start to crawl across the ring for the cover, and I'm just like, this, I could just, it was amazing.
I know. I feel like you're getting
It was
emotional
amazing.
talking about it now.
It was amazing, yeah.
It's so
and I always
cool.
say, like, if I could just bottle up that emotion
Yeah.
for people, just to give it to people, like, because
Yeah.
that feeling was, I can't even put into words of what that feels like.
Right.
You know, it's just like one of those moments of just like, that was it.
That's
It
so
was
cool.
great. It was great.
You have such a cool story. You know,
I'm very
You're fortunate, but you also worked for it.
I
you know?
did,
It's like
yeah.
you weren't handed anything.
No.
You like started from the bottom. Now you're here. No.
All the way up.
Ooh la la.
You're my kind of chick. You know, I feel like you're strong, you're independent, you're athletic. Women, I think, have a hard time dating.
It takes a very secure, strong man to be able to handle a strong woman.
Right.
Right? It's really hard for two alphas in a relationship, and oftentimes, like, women, like we are alphas, you know, so it takes a really, really strong man to not only, like, to have, you know, enough confidence in himself to be able to handle a woman with equal confidence, you
Yep.
know, like, and not that the women out there aren't super confident, but they're also willing to bend and give, or like, you know, I'll make dinner. You know, not that we don't make dinner or do those things.
Yeah,
It's
we
not
bend,
like,
but it's
yeah,
like-
we don't bend, but we're not going to like just adhere to their whims, you know, and
Right.
it just, I think some men really, really love it, but they're super confident men, and they're very, you know, confident in their position and their you know, who they are as an individual, and it's also they don't feel like they're in competition
Right.
with you. That's
Yeah.
the hardest thing, I think, for me. That's been like, it's always like, you don't want to be in competition with your partner, because you guys are supposed to be partners and equals and lift each other up and help each other.
Well, I was going to ask you actually, as this type of woman, you successfully, are happily married, you've got a beautiful child. Like, so how did you know what I mean? How did you guys come together?
Well, we met in the business,
Yeah,
but obviously, it has been a balancing act of
Yeah.
both of us. Like, there's been times when he's been on top and I've been at home pregnant and like going, I was never used to that type of. I never even envisioned that type of, and I love it. And it's amazing. It's the greatest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
But I just never envisioned myself as a mom. Like, I guess I just hadn't carved out that piece of my life for myself. I'm very blessed, and I'm happy it happened the way it did. You know, where it was just kind of unexpected. And like, oh, okay, well,
This is happening.
This is happening. This is amazing. Okay, embrace it. I don't have to. I can eat whatever I want right now.
Yeah. Yes. Well, okay, so one thing that I do want to ask you about pregnancy in sports, in tennis, Serena being pregnant and then making a comeback, Victoria Azarenka being pregnant and then making a comeback. It's a very hard thing to do. Explain to me how this went for you, how it is in wrestling, how do they handle it?
Well, first off, for the first time in my life, and the last, I've been training to wrestle since I was 18 years old. So I've been dieting, I've been doing all this for the entirety of my life, training, working out. I still worked out my entire pregnancy, what I was allowed to do, but I quit dieting. I was like, I would wake up at 2 a.m. and be like, oh, I could really go for a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
And I lived in the country, so I'd have to drive 20 minutes to get this cheeseburger. That's kind of how I knew it was a boy, is I craved savory foods. I was just like, oh God, hamburgers. So I did gain probably more weight than I anticipated,
Okay.
and I realized it after. But I think that, for 9 months, your body goes through this entire transformation, both inside and out, hormones and everything, and then on the outside. And you're watching this from the, as a woman, it's cool at first until you get really big, and then you're like, oh God.
So getting back into wrestling, how was that?
Originally, when I first got back in the ring, it was more just to knock the rust off, because I hadn't been in the ring for so long after having him. And then, you also you can't just hop back in the ring after you have a child either. So I had to
Totally.
wait that hiatus of, a couple months before I stepped foot in the ring. But I still didn't feel physically like I belonged in the ring.
Okay.
I felt like it took me about a year to get physically to where I felt comfortable in front of the audience.
Okay. And do you think the wrestling world is has a good system in regards to, you know, with childbirth and their women athletes needing to take time off and come back?
Yeah, I think it's something that they've just opened the doors to, because it really wasn't a thing before, and it's mostly because the roster is an older not like an older, but like it's an older demographic of women. Yeah. Whereas before, most of the roster was, you know, everyone was kind of in their 20s. Whereas now, you know, you look at the landscape of the roster, and there's half the roster are women in their 30s, and that's when most of us are like, maybe I should think about having a baby if this is something that I want to do, especially the ones that are married or like are thinking about that mindset. So I feel like it's something that the companies really started to embrace, because they recognize that these women are so mega talented, they don't want to lose them, and they know that they need to give them, you know, that time off to go and have a child and give them the proper time to like recoup and get back, you know. And they're so open. They're so great. Like we have those conversations, you know, about me with my son, and if I'm getting enough time at home, or, you know, if I need to bring him on the road, or, you know, if I need to just take some time off, and they're very understanding, which is amazing.
That's really great to hear, because I think it's definitely been a process, you know, in sports, and that's, I think, something in other sports too that is just really still kind of under fire, you know. Some sports don't handle it well, and obviously men are not going to be bearing children, so they never even have to deal with this. So it's nice to hear that the wrestling world handles it well.
Well, I think it's almost like, just because you have, like, it was the society before where people go like, well, once you have a child, that's it. Like even women's mentality was that, like, well, once I have a child, that's it, then I'm a mom. They're like, their career per se is over. Whereas I'm like, you're just in your 30s, you're just getting started. Like that's just the beginning of our, you know, of our life, in the sense of like, not only are we now fully aware of who we are, but we have the confidence in ourselves and our abilities, where in our 20s we were still learning that and trying to gain that confidence and figure out who we are and what we're about. Whereas that's when I really felt like, okay, I'm a real woman in my 30s.
I love that you came back to wrestling. I mean, I love when women have children and then they come back to their sport. I really love the example that it sets when you come back, you know, stronger than ever, and you're like, great, I can do it all.
And I'm grateful too, the company was, you know, wanted me to come back and were willing to have me back, and also play this balancing act with me as a mom now. It's incredible.
On top of being a wrestler and, you know, a mom and a wife, you are also a country music star, which I am so excited about because I love country music. It is all I listen to.
Oh, good.
How do you balance all of these things?
I don't know. I have an amazing team. And obviously my family and my husband are super supportive, and they help me out a lot. Music for me is just, it's a different outlet. Like when I was a kid, I want to be a wrestler. When I was saying that to my dad, I would also be in my bedroom singing on my little mixtapes. And I took chorus, and I played violin for 5 years, and music has always inspired me. I just feel like that has been a journey for me, and through everything that I've seen and done and been through in my life, and seen my friends go through, like I've been able to, that's where the songwriting comes from me, is like those experiences.
Do you think that your country music helps wrestling and vice versa? Almost kind of, for example, some people go to therapy, you know, to express themselves. Does it kind of help you kind of put things out on the table and, you know, release whatever's inside then you can be a better wrestler too?
I feel like it helps keep me balanced. You know, because wrestling is such an aggro type of thing. Whereas music is, I feel like you get a little bit more of like the softer side, or the real side of me. Because you feel so much more exposed. When I'm wrestling, I am Mickie James. That's my name. Like, I am myself, but at the same time, it is this amplified, like, cartoon type of superhero character, when Mickie James in real life behind closed doors can be very weak at times. I don't put that out there, but I'm still sensitive, and I'm still a woman, and I'm have feelings. I think my music allows me to express that and to open those doors, or to even release some of the, you know, anger or whatever else I'm feeling from any other aspect of my life, including my wrestling career. You know, like whatever it is that's, you know, on my mind, or like making me feel a certain way, I can release that. And whether it's only on paper or it actually makes it into a song, that's great. You know, like I have notebooks. I just carry notebooks with me. It's ridiculous. And it's just got like lyrics or like ideas or sparks of imagination or whatever, and the starts of things that I've never even finished, but it's just all ideas, right? And it helps me release it and to get it out. At the end of the day, for me, and this is ran true for wrestling, for music, for everything in my life. Like, people don't remember everything that you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And that's just, at the end of the day, it's like how if you can make a person feel something, you know, whether it's love or anger or whatever, they'll never forget that.
In wrestling, there are storylines, but then there's a winner and a loser, and how much of it is scripted? And it's like so intriguing to me, you know, because it's like it's not. Is it? I don't know. Do you know who's gonna win? You don't go in predetermined, or you can't tell. She just gave me the can't answer that question, and you know I can't answer that question face. Okay, fair enough. I tried.
It's pretty easy to be in awe of such an all-around awesome person. I left this interview feeling invigorated, motivated, full of life, and just honestly generally pumped up. I mean, how cool was Mickie? So cool, laid back, funny, modest, and quite frankly, a killer example for women that, yes, we can have it all. I'm Carrie Fierman, and this is Talk Sports. I'll catch you guys next week. If I were a WWE wrestler, my storyline would for sure be stage 5 clinger to Mickie James. And I'm totally okay with that. Oh, hey, Mickie, hey, you wanna grab lunch? How about dinner? Coffee? Okay, all right, maybe next time.
Hey, can't you see?
I'm a rockin' southern girl running wild and free.
Hey, y'all walking through the door.
High class style, country to the core.